there, it's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do to that like button. Shouts to Brandon Davies. And if you're not yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, please also do that while you're here. Matt Norlander, how are you on this, what is it, Tuesday? It's Tuesday morning.
Tuesday morning, made it until, I know you can't identify with this, but a personal note of pride here, made it until last night before we finally, the house I live in was built in the 50s, so we have no, I don't live like UGP, don't have central air, we go with the window units up here in the Northeast. Made it until yesterday, last night, before all the window units had to be installed, so finally got it done. Where are you right now, by the way?
I am in a conference room at a hotel in Arlington, Texas, in the shadows of Globe Life Field. Brought the family down for a couple of days I try to take the kids to see the Mets in a road game every year, just to experience a new stadium. So we decided this year we would make it Globe Life, and we'd come down and we'd do, the water park one day, the theme park one day, baseball game at night. We might go see a MLS game tomorrow night. We're trying to figure it out. We're on the fly, but it was a wonderful experience at the ballpark last night. Got to watch the Mets just beat the reigning world champions' brains in. And then I always buy seats where we're right by like the Mets dugout. So they're like yelling at Francisco Lindor and yelling at Pete Alonso. It's a fun thing to watch them get to experience that.
Okay. I didn't know. I know your boys are in baseball. I didn't know if this was like travel parenting gone insane and you had to, for some reason, go from Mississippi all the way to Arlington.
No, we're not doing that for
I would believe it. I would believe it.
Oh, it's been discussed.
I would believe it.
I think at this point in our travel baseball, at the age of 7, we have committed to, we're going to play in Tupelo and Oxford and Jackson, Mississippi, and the surrounding areas, but we're not going any more than about an hour and a half, 2 hours away. Not at this age, not yet. But I understand why you might assume so, because yes, this is a sport for 7-year-olds where you buy $400 bats, and you have, $400 bats, and if you don't have one, people look at you like you're poor. Like who's the poor kid with the $250 bat? It's outrageous. All of it is outrageous.
Oh my gosh,
it's outrageous.
Well, that's good to know. And had you been in town and there had been a Game 6 in the finals, maybe you would have looked into that. Alas, not the case. We will get to the Celtics winning the NBA championship before the end of the show.
All right, let's get into it. The biggest headline since we last talked that's going to impact college basketball next season and maybe for many years to come. It originated in Manhattan, Kansas, where Jerome Tang secured a commitment from former Illinois standout Coleman Hawkins. The cost, roughly $2 million in NIL deals for 1 year of Coleman Hawkins. Norlander, as I watched it all unfold, I couldn't help but wonder if Coleman Hawkins has figured out the key to maximizing payment in the transfer portal. Just get in it and then stay in it. Yeah. Don't look up. Don't talk to nobody until at least June. Let supply decrease. Let demand increase. Go get $2 million. Is this the way to do it?
I wouldn't listen. It's worked out well for Coleman Hawkins. I wouldn't necessarily advise his path because you're never guaranteed these kind of things. According to Evan Miyakawa and evanmiya.com, let me just make sure this is correct here. I think Hawkins was number 2. He was, according to Evan Miya. Our own David Cobb put Hawkins, I think, 20th. Evan Miya's got him as the number 2 transfer in the portal this cycle. Kadari Richmond out of Seton Hall being 1, Umar Bala from Arizona being 3, Hogard from Michigan State being 4, and then weirdly enough, Mark Mitchell from Duke being 5. Again, he's Evan's algorithm with this is both offense and defense and Bayesian, projections and all that stuff. So keep that in mind. It is going to be a little bit different from what you might expect. Even if you don't agree with it, I think across the board, Coleman Hawkins should be viewed as one of the more valuable transfers in this year's cycle. And I think his addition to Kansas State should probably have the Wildcats as a top 25 team. Before we continue any further, I intentionally did not look. Did you put K-State in your top 25 now that Hawkins joined the roster?
I did not, but they're on my radar. If I did a top 32, maybe even 29, they would be in it. They're in that range. I'm intrigued by what Tang has been able to get done. Really heavy in the front court, They have secured commitments from 3 different players who primarily played center in college basketball next season. My assumption, if not understanding, is that they're going to try to move Coleman Hawkins to the wing a little bit, and they're going to be really big up front. I saw Jerome talk to, I think, CJ Moore, our buddy over at The Athletic, and mentioned that this roster construction is similar to the roster construction on a Baylor team. I believe maybe 2012 is the year he said, but they were big across the front. This team's going to be big across the front. I mean, we just saw the Minnesota Timberwolves eliminate the previous world champion Denver Nuggets by being big up front. So, I know we got into a habit of everybody trying to go small and small ball stuff and whatever, but in college basketball, being big is still effective, and Kansas State's going to be really big. I'm interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah, agreed. Particularly at the college level, you're always going to need bigs, and they can be used in different kind of ways. That 2011-12 team is right on. As a refresher from that Baylor team, shouts to Perry Jones, 6'11", Quincy Miller, 6'9", and then Quincy Acey, the biggest 6'7" dude I maybe have ever seen in college. They all played. They got significant minutes. Pierre Jackson, Brady Heslip, G League legend, was also on that 2011-2012 team that made the Elite Eight and famously lost to Kentucky in the regional final there after winning 30 games. That was either the best or the second best Baylor team in history up to that point. And game was different then than it is now, but point is well taken here. And Hawkins' commitment comes on the heels of them getting Ugonna Onyenso from Kentucky, who was not an offensive machine, but he is going to be a big presence down low. And adding Onyenso and then getting Hawkins, who picked Kansas State over the likes of, and not at the final stretch, but, there was intrigue with North Carolina, and there was a look at Arkansas. And at one point, Arkansas was considered the leader. And then LSU and SMU and Louisville, all these schools were at certain points heavily involved in trying to recruit Coleman Hawkins to their roster. Kansas State winds up winning out. And because he's on the roster, I'll decide this once we get to October, and I got to do my top 101 teams list here. I would think I'll put K-State top 25. Doug McDaniel's coming over, another short king that Jerome Tang's going to try and capitalize off of in the portal there. See what he can do after Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry did a pretty solid job last season, and he's been able to do that the first two seasons at K-State, and kind of having a dynamic small guard that can really be a playmaker. Achua is also a name to know, coming over from Samford. Max Jones, who isn't a name that people would know, but he was a 15-point game guy at Cal State Fullerton, so he was a scorer. Brandon Housen wasn't much of a mover or shaker at Nova, but he is on the roster here, and those are kind of the big names to know. There aren't any huge names returning. They do have a few guys who are returning. David Ngesson is the biggest one, who was an 8-point-a-game guy. So if you wanted to have a little bit of skepticism in terms of K-State being a top 25 roster because there's so much turnover, I'd get it. Not getting Kaluma back, he's obviously still on the market in the portal. Had he been able to return, I don't know, frankly, he would have gotten a Coleman Hawkins, but I could argue that Hawkins will be an upgrade. I do expect Hawkins to probably be the focal piece on the offense, I think, because he can stretch, he can shoot. As to your 2 million number and kind of what you mentioned off the top here, it worked out well for Hawkins in this regard. He was debating going into the NBA draft and staying there. Didn't wind up doing it. Had no assurances he would be picked, and certainly wouldn't have been a first round pick. There's work to do on the defensive end, but he was a big with real skill set, good length, a good offensive option, and the market became the market rather quickly. I mean, I was told that his NIL package is slightly north of 2 million. And when everything's put into the pot by the end of the season, he might wind up making more in NIL than anyone next season. I don't know if that'll be the case, but he'll certainly be one of the biggest earners, and he's up there with Great Osabor and a few others that are were able to approach that 2 million this past transfer cycle. But his number was north of 1.5 for weeks. I mean, and there were other schools that were involved in there that were looking to get him to that number, if not more. Toss in a car, do all this kind of stuff. And hey, go get it, man. More power to you. Coleman Hawkins wired a little bit differently than a lot of other guys in college basketball. Very forthcoming, not afraid to speak his mind, good character, fun player to talk to, really fun player to watch. And we will see if he winds up being worth the expenditure. Now, somewhat ironically or unexpectedly, Kansas State just happens to be one of the, and I don't, if you're wanting the why of this, I don't have the why. All right. Jerome Tang, his staff, and the people around that program have done a great job at building out a great collective resource. But in speaking around the sport and kind of checking in on this every week since the season ended, K-State is just regarded as a top 5 team in terms of NIL resources, how much they can put forward. And that's been reflected in the fact that they were able to get Coleman Hawkins at such a big number on the heels of Achua was one of the more chased mid-major transfers, obviously. And Ugonna Onyenso, who had a few other big-time programs looking into him, most notably North Carolina and Arkansas. He winds up going to play for the Wildcats and the Little Apple there. So good get. K-State's got some real intrigue to it. I think it should be a Big 12 contender. And by that, I mean, I think K-State should reasonably expect to be somewhere in the top 3 to 6 conversation of the Big 12 next season. It's year 3 for Tang. They had a letdown in year 2 after a really awesome year 1. And I expect Coleman Hawkins to be among the 20 to 25 best players in the sport next season. If K-State is really good, Parrish, if they wind up being a team that can be top 3 in the Big 12 and Hawkins is the centerpiece, if Hawkins can become a 15-point a game, 8 rebounds, couple dimes, stay on the floor for 32, 30, 33 minutes, then he's got a chance to be an All-American. I thought it was a necessary get for K-State to have viable NCAA tournament hopes. They got him, and that was one of the biggest gets of the portal cycle over the past 2 months.
Okay, you said a lot of stuff there that hammers home the initial point that I wanted to make, which is, okay, so Coleman Hawkins, like, maybe if it really happens, can be one of the 20 to 25 best players in college.
I think he's got a shot.
Yeah. Okay, great. This is my point. And he's making $2 million. Like, you ain't even saying he's got to be an All-American. Like, that's not even where you're.
You would hope that he will be, but I'm not guaranteeing that he will be.
Okay, he was the 3rd leading scorer at Illinois this past season. Now, he's more than just a scorer. He's impactful defensively, all this. I'm not trying to – I don't like it when people just make it out like, well, he barely scores or didn't score enough, so he's not – like that. There's a lot of different ways to impact basketball games besides putting the ball in the basket.
But on that note, did hear from a few coaches that are like, hold on, am I getting this right? Did you check this guy's stats? Like, good player, but you're telling me $2 million? I'm like, what do you want me to tell you, man? He is what someone would pay him, and this is where it fell in the cycle, man.
Okay, and so the other thing you said was this was necessary for Kansas State. All right, so think about what we're talking about here. It's June 18th right now. It was middle of June when Coleman Hawkins committed. There aren't that many impactful players out there left, all right? Supply is way down. Demand is way up. You have schools all over the country who just recently lost players who they were hoping might come back to school, and they decided at the last minute or in the final days to remain in the 2024 NBA draft. Well, I can just tell you there are lots of coaches out there who had NIL packages like on the table waiting for those people. Hey, come back and it's yours. Well, then they don't come back. Well, guess what? That money's still there. I mean, it's not like a big pile, but you can take that money now and put it somewhere else. Where else do you want to put it? Well, there ain't that many places, but Coleman Hawkins is available. It's an incredible example of supply demand and how this works. And I guess there's a lot of different approaches, a lot of different ways to go about it. If you have your mind made up that you just want to play at Tennessee no matter what, or want to play at Ohio State no matter what, or want to play at Duke no matter what, and you get that opportunity early out of the transfer portal, perhaps you just jump on that because that's what you want to do. But if you are, and Coleman Hawkins seemed closer to this than not, if you're willing to just like, hey, who got the best package? I'll come play for you. If you're willing to just take that approach, enter the draft, go through the process, withdraw at the last minute, and then say, hey, my DMs are open. What do you got? And it's going to be necessary, the word you use, for somebody to come in and do what they got to do to get you on their campus. And relative to what other NIL packages are known to be out there, I think we can all agree. We can all be happy for Coleman Hawkins. We can all agree that based on what other people are getting, this seems like an overpayment. He's going to get paid next year roughly the same as the 30th pick in the NBA draft. A guy who will be on a guaranteed NBA contract, NBA roster, is going to make roughly the same amount of money as Coleman Hawkins next year. And he's going to make more money next year than most, perhaps all, second-round picks. So that's the other interesting aspect of this. Like, where's this go next? Because what we've just established is that college basketball programs have decided somebody like Coleman Hawkins, not even an All-American, not a legitimate first-round NBA draft option, maybe not even a second-round option. Somebody have decided he's worth $2 million. And that is way over market value for what NBA franchises would decide he's worth right now. All right? So what's the next step? What if somebody decides, all right, if Coleman Hawkins is worth 2, why can't Cal Filipowski be worth 6? All right? So
Sure.
like,
I mean, you got to get the money, but yeah,
I know
hear
you, I know, but
you
like,
got to get it. I mean, it's not,
I know it's not
it's not the
nothing.
couch cushions. So
I know it's not the couch cushion, but somebody just found $2 million for Coleman Hawkins. It's like it's just sort of always it's been understood pre-NIL. Like if you're a second round pick, you kind of got to go
Yeah.
because you likely will get some sort of guaranteed contract that it won't be the Wembanyama deal, but you'll have money. You got to go. Now it's like even if you're a second round pick, colleges can pay you more than what NBA franchises will. Are we going to get to the point where colleges, as crazy as this might sound, are willing to pay you more than what the NBA rookie scale allows you? There's NBA rookie deals. Like if you're picked 15th, for instance, which is where I've got Filipowski in my latest mock draft. The 15th pick gets a 2-year contract worth roughly $7 million. There's a 3rd-year option, all that stuff, but it's basically 2 years, $7 million. What if somebody just said, hey, Cal Filipowski, here's
for the 15th pick?
Yeah, for the 15th pick, it's 2 years and $7 million combined. All right. For what if somebody says, "Hey, Filipowski, here's 2 years, $10 million. Come play 2 years of college basketball for me." I know you get to free agency later and all that stuff.
Yeah. But no, it's interesting. And by the way, a great thing, obviously, for college sports that this is the case, and you will have a few players that are going to opt to do this. And hey, I think it's a great thing, particularly with someone who, if if Kansas State is a ranked team next season, and Hawkins is one of the 25 best players in the sport, like we're going to be talking about him. We're going to know it. Kansas State, also being relevant in its own state and having some big time matchups looming with maybe the number 1 team next season, Kansas. This is a good thing. And to spin it forward, GP, because I've talked with this with a few folks here over the past couple of weeks. The expectation is that it's funny. If you'd gone 6 months ago, the expectation was that the NIL market would dip a little bit, maybe 10 to 15%. Didn't happen whatsoever. Next year, it's expected to become even more because, as you well know, we don't have the COVID year. It's gone. And this year's portal, it was about 20% of the players that were in the portal were exercising that bonus COVID year. Those players will no longer be available. It will be a smaller pool, which means that will trickle up, and there will be even more on the guys that are considered top 5, top 10, top 15, top 20 names in the portal. Let's say we had 3 or 4 players this year, or will have by the time we get to the end of the season, that wind up making north of $2 million in NIL. I would anticipate that next season, not this upcoming one, but the year after that, 25, 26, that number will probably double because there's just going to be fewer players. And I'll tell you what, people around the sport are bracing for it to get even more competitive at the top of the food chain.
No, in sports, in American sports, over the past couple of years, the thing that has really rocketed college athletes' compensation packages quickly. I mean, it's like it's this and then it's this. It jumps. And NBA coaching salaries.
Yeah.
They just like you used to make. The guys that used to make 4 now make 9. And in college, it was like, remember, it was just a year ago, I think we were talking about, did Hunter Dickinson get $1 million?
Yeah.
That was a year ago.
Right.
Now it's like Coleman Hawkins got 2.
I know.
Coleman Hawkins got twice. I mean, who knows what the real numbers are, but based on the reporting, Coleman Hawkins just got twice as much.
More than twice, yeah. Yeah, based on what I've been told, it's definitely more than twice now.
Okay, more than twice 1 year later.
Yes.
That's wild.
It's crazy. I mean, I was told there were players that were going for more in NIL this upcoming season than some of the biggest programs you've heard of paid for NIL all of last season. Like that's how drastically it's changed, man. It's
well, it's all connected. I mean, think about how much these coaches are making now. It used to, when I started in this business, it was like I can remember when John Calipari got off to a rough start at Memphis. It didn't go well early. People were like, I can't believe we're paying this guy $1 million. Now Coleman Hawkins makes twice as much. All right?
Really? Exactly. That's actually, how about that?
No, it was like,
was he really making $1 million in year 1 at Memphis?
Less than $1 million. And
was he really?
And then
wow.
I believe it then got up to $1 million, and that was a thing.
You think about how he got the terms under which he got the job. Yeah. I can understand that in retrospect.
It was just a different time. It was just a different time. Now all these guys, like, everybody makes 2.5, 3, 4. So think about it in these terms. You make $6 million a year, $5 million a year coaching in the SEC, whatever. You're on the hot seat. All right. You have a good year. You can get a 4-year contract extension. Let's call it 4 years, $25 million. You don't have a good year, you're fired. How much is it worth it to you to get a Coleman Hawkins? And I'm not saying that's the situation for Kansas State, obviously, but
Parrish putting Tang on the hot seat.
That's not what I meant. Because clearly he's not. What I meant was, if you are on that hot seat, then getting a player who could maybe get you a contract extension could really be worth millions of dollars. Not just, in basketball terms, but like to you personally. Yeah. And that's another thing to always consider about this stuff. I love that we get to have these. We used to have to whisper about this kind of stuff.
No, it's much better that it's all out.
Oh, I love it. Like we used to have to turn the mics off and be like, "Do you hear what they did to get Coleman Hawkins?" And now it's like Coleman Hawkins tells us what they did, as it should be.
Yeah, without a doubt, it's honestly, it's covering the sport. It's way more refreshing this way. It's still a massive pain in the ass for these coaches, but that's why you get paid the money. I mean, it's not saying it's not a real aggravation and hasn't made the job a lot harder. It has, but shift in power and balance has tilted significantly. Some players that deserve it, and some players that are. You hear the stories on some of these guys that are averaging like 5 and 3, and they want to command 300,000. Like whatever, go and try and get it. That's hilarious. But for the big names and the guys that are producers, for sure. But yes, I have heard from a few that are like, Coleman Hawkins really going to get $2 million? This guy, did you check his numbers? Was he even the best player in Illinois last year? He wasn't. He's going to go at $2 million. Hey man, he's a big. He can shoot from deep. He's got good potential, and he's going to squeeze one more year out of college. And there were teams that really wanted the services, so go get that cheddar, buddy.
Congratulations to him. Also, since we last talked, former Illinois standout Terrence Shannon was found not guilty of rape in Kansas by a jury of his peers. Is that going to make him a first-round pick next week? I'm going to talk to Norlander about that next. But first, let's get a word from our partners. Big headline heading into the weekend: Terrence Shannon, the All-American from Illinois, was found not guilty of rape by a jury of his peers in Kansas late last week. Obviously, just simply put, great for him to be found not guilty of such a serious crime. Also great to have this all wrapped up in advance of the 2024 NBA draft, because had it not been, it would have been a cloud just hanging over the entire situation that I think you could reasonably assume would have impacted his fortunes next week. Now, I don't know that it should. In fact, I don't think that it should. Norlander, you put together a mock draft. Would you have Terrence Shannon in your first round right now?
I would. I'm working on a mock right now that will either go up on Wednesday or Thursday of this week. It's basically the big board draft that I do every year, where I try and project out the career, who I think will wind up being the best pros in a given draft. And this, on a side note, I am less enthused about this class than, frankly, anyone that I have done since I've really started following the draft in this kind of realm through this scope since like 09-ish. It's kind of wild. But that aside, I will have Terrence Shannon Jr. somewhere in that top 20. I think he projects as someone who can have a long-lasting NBA career, unquestionably. And I think he's got the size, the skill set. If he can become more of a committed defender, all the better. But he certainly has an NBA-ready body and can be a very like plug-and-play swing. And so, yeah, this news that came down obviously worked very much in his favor. And I think the hope and intention for a while now was to get this trial set and get it done before the draft happened, so that there would be a decision one way or a verdict one way or the other, so that there could be clarity on it. And he was found not guilty of the two charges that were held against him previously for rape and sexual battery. It's a major significant headline, and this was a story that loomed over college hoops basically from December, when the story became known. The allegations date back to a trip he took to Kansas last fall, and then up through the end of Illinois season, which I saw end in person when UConn took him out in Boston with that famous 30-0 run. Shannon's attorney, Mark Sutter, put out a statement last week that said, as we stated in September 23, we emphatically denied these charges and waited for our day in court. That time has come. The jury has spoken and justice was served. The public at large owes Terrence Shannon Jr. an apology. Meantime, a spokesperson for the Douglas County DA office said, "It takes tremendous courage for a survivor of sexual assault to come forward. We will continue to pursue justice on behalf of survivors." Obviously, Illinois fans, in light of this news coming down, quite vocal, and to no surprise whatsoever with that. But in fallout of this verdict here, I think it's important every time that we have one of these cases, and it is unfortunate to even acknowledge the fact that it feels inevitable that we will have one again. I'd love to never have another one of these ever, period. But you look at the history of this stuff, and it just seems like it's inevitable it will surface again. Everything should be treated on a case-by-case basis with consideration to parties on both sides, both alleged perpetrators and alleged victims in this. And Terrence Shannon Jr. did have his name, cleared by a not guilty verdict by a jury of his peers. What is interesting in this is that he and his team were so definitive on this. Mitch Gilfillan, who is an attorney and a former college basketball coach who was tweeting about the trial and followed it from the start, he said 2 weeks ago, the DA office offered Terrence Shannon Jr. a plea deal in which he would have a sexual assault conviction on his record, but there would be a promise of no jail time. Otherwise, he probably would have been on probation. There were other stuff that was dealing with, but it was basically like, we can strike the deal now. We promise you, you won't go to jail. You'll just have this on your record. They flat out refused to do that because they had full confidence in his story, in Terrence Shannon Jr.'s story and the trial that would come to pass. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. And Shannon Jr. was found not guilty in what was, of course, a very high-profile story and something that served as an uncomfortable backdrop amid what was the NCAA tournament, and an Illinois team that was, frankly, if it wasn't in UConn's region, would have been capable of making the Final Four.
I had a few people ask me, like, is this really just, as far as his NBA draft stock and all of that stuff, now a non-issue, or is it still something that will come up? I asked some folks who work in front offices, and they said, it's still something, if we were talking to him, we would want to talk to him about it, but like nothing that came out in the trial suggests that there was any issue there, and obviously was found not guilty. So the impression I was left with was that it's mostly a non-issue now. They will evaluate him largely on his basketball ability, and I could certainly see him going in the 20s. I would personally have him in the 30s, but I do think he will hear his name get picked next week, which is awesome if it happens, because there was a moment where it looked like that was very much up in doubt. You read the statement from the attorney, him mentioning that folks owe Terrence Shannon an apology, and I'm sure somebody does, and I don't want to make a big deal out of this, but like my mentions have been in shambles. Even before,
have they?
Even before the verdict came down, started. I'm sure I've seen you get. Yeah, you're in it. I've
been tagged.
Yeah, right.
Just a couple hundred times.
All right, and so it's just a lot of wild stuff. It even started before the verdict came in, like apologize to Terrence Shannon. You owe Terrence Shannon an apology. You owe Terrence Shannon an apology for calling him a rapist. And as respectfully as I can say this, I didn't do any of that. None of it. I never called him a rapist. In fact, we only talked about this entire situation on this podcast twice. I wrote about it once. That's the entirety of our conversations about this. The first time we talked about it, which was the day that he was arrested, if you go back and watch it, among the first things I say is that it is important to understand that false allegations do happen all the time in these types of situations. And and this isn't a popular thing to say, particularly given the way I vote in elections, but there's a sentiment out there, and we've talked about this before, where people say, you should believe all women, always believe women, always believe women. And why I understand the idea behind that, logically, that has never made sense to me, because what that suggests is that nobody has ever lied about an interaction with another person, that nobody has ever falsely accused another person of sexual assault. And so I just don't subscribe to that. Like I had a roommate, I've told this story before, either in college or right out of college, who was accused of sexual assault falsely. It was a completely made up story. And like the cops knocked on our door and they investigated the whole thing. He was never charged because the case fell apart quickly, and the woman recanted her story once video evidence proved that she was making it up. After she admitted she was making it up. But that was a scary situation. So, like, quite literally, among the first things I ever said about this when you and I talked about it was that exactly, right? And then we kind of just left it there. He was suspended because Illinois had a policy in place that automatically triggered that suspension. You charge with this type of crime, it automatically triggers this suspension. And we just sort of left it there. And then I believe he missed 6 games, and he went to court and he got the injunction, and he was reinstated to the team, at which point we talked about it again. And even at that point, and what I wrote about it, and to this day, please, I invite anybody, go find it if you can find it. The idea that I need to apologize to him for calling him a rapist just is like, so it'd be like asking me to apologize for stealing a car. Like, I didn't steal a car. I didn't call anybody a rapist. You ready for this? Never even offered an opinion about guilt or innocence ever. Not one time throughout the entire thing of Terrence Shannon. To the extent that I had an issue with how this unfolded, it was with the way Illinois handled it, because I thought they took a convenient way out of it. When he was arrested, and we'll keep this simple and then we'll move on. When he was arrested, they announced the suspension and explained that they have this policy in place, and it automatically triggers a suspension. Like, hey, this is the way we handle these situations. And by the way, the reasons a lot of universities have similar policies is because there's a history in college athletics of selective punishment, right? Mm-hmm. The 6th leading scorer gets charged with something very serious. You're suspended. We can't have you representing us. The All-American gets charged with something serious. Well, we don't have all the facts yet. And to sort of eliminate the idea of that kind of stuff happening, policies were put in place. It's not the only reason, but it's on the list of reasons. So Illinois triggers this policy, and that's that. Well, then Terrence Shannon goes to court, which is exactly what I would have done if I were him, I guess. I don't blame him at all. Like, he was doing what's best for him. I understand.
Yeah, he was in effect suing the university.
That's right.
Because his case, we can keep it moving here, but as a refresher, and this, I just don't remember many instances like this. It wasn't unprecedented, but we don't see this a lot. He was literally suing his university because he was wanting a presumption of innocence. His reasoning was, I have a narrow window here because I'm trying to go to the NBA, and by restricting me from playing after being accused of a crime that I'm saying I didn't commit, you're restricting me of my rights that I should be able to be played. So he sued the university. The judge agreed with that. And in essence, that's why he was allowed to return to play.
Okay, so we get to that point. My issue with the whole thing is not that Terrence Shannon was reinstated, not that Terrence Shannon was ever suspended. Handle it however you want to handle it. My issue was that when he was arrested, they triggered this policy and stood behind their policy. And when the injunction was granted, they did not stand up and say, we stand with Terrence Shannon because we believe in a young man. Those are the quotes that came after the not guilty verdict. We've always believed in Terrence Shannon, all that stuff, which is fine. But they didn't publicly express that, and they didn't stand on that. What they said was, hey, there's nothing we can do. It's out of our hands. The judge is ruling, and I thought that was not only wrong, just lame. Like, I would have respect for you ready for this? Going forward, a university standing up and saying, we know this young man, and we genuinely don't believe this is an accurate charge, and we're going to stand with him. We are uncomfortable ripping his last season of college basketball away under these circumstances because we believe in him. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I can at least respect that you're standing on something. I can also respect we have a policy in place, and it doesn't matter if you're an All-American or not. We do not allow people under these circumstances to represent us in athletic competition. That's our policy. I stand on that. Stand on something. They stood on nothing. They took a very convenient way to say, okay, what we can just say, we don't have to stand up for Terrence Shannon, and we don't have to stand behind our policy that removes Terrence Shannon from the team. We can just say, the judge said what the judge said, and there's nothing we can do. It's out of our hands. I thought that was, again, I'm not fired up about it. that was a convenient way out of this, because there quite literally were things they could do. If they wanted to believe in their policy, they could have appealed it. They could have challenged it in other ways. They chose not to. Once the judge said what the judge said, they cowered and pushed their policy to the side, when quite literally there were things they could have done, which, let me be clear, might be because I've heard some people say this, well, thank God they did. Thank God they stood down, because otherwise they would have had an innocent man final season of college basketball ripped away. To that, I would say, I hear you. But that is an argument for maybe this policy shouldn't be in place to begin with. That's an argument against the policy. That's not an argument against anything else. And so my issue was always with that specifically, and nothing more. Quite literally, I'm sure other people, certainly student sections, expressed opinions about whether Terrence Shannon was innocent or guilty, whether he was this or that. Again, I never did it. I never commented on any of that. I merely talked about him as somebody who had been charged with rape and was playing college basketball under those circumstances. And respectfully, that in that moment was an accurate way to describe him.
Yeah, I would. If you're an Illinois fan checking in on this and fired up, go back and listen. Like, Parrish is pretty passionate on the subject, but he is recalling what he actually said there, and offered some strong opinions on it. And I completely get it. What I would caution, I'm not speaking directly to GPM, speaking to, I guess, everyone listening to the pod. If and when something like this happens again, people dig in their heels so aggressively on either side, and it is important. You don't get. I mean, these cases are often very messy, and frankly, for parties on both sides, like, the verdict is done, it's in, but there are effects that can be felt long after on both sides, no matter how a verdict winds up coming down. You don't get immediate answers on this. Oftentimes, evidence is lacking in these cases, and some people like to apply the result in one case and stick it philosophically to the next one or previous ones. It just doesn't work that way. So, obviously, with Terrence Shannon Jr. being found not guilty amongst a jury of his peers in Kansas, deliberations took less than 2 hours, reportedly. Like,
and let me be clear.
This was an open shut case once it went to trial, apparently.
Based on the evidence involved, because
there basically was no evidence.
It shouldn't have taken 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It should not have taken 2 minutes to return a not guilty verdict. I mean, it got so wild in my mentions. People are like, "Oh, you must be sick that he was found not guilty." What? Like, based on everything I'm aware of, Terrence Shannon is an innocent man, or at the very least, there is a mountain of reasonable doubt, and there is no way anybody could have returned a guilty verdict there, based on the evidence that I saw. So the idea that I would be sitting around going, "Oh man, shucks," what? Like, it would be a tragedy. It is a tragedy anytime a young person is falsely accused and falsely and incorrectly charged and incorrectly convicted of a crime he or she did not commit. Like what? Again, it's all based, and this sort of stuff has happened to me before. Like people get this idea that you said or did something, and it's like, that's not, I didn't say or do that, and then it just becomes a thing. Mike Woodson. Every time Mike Woodson would get like a 5-star recruit, somebody would tweet me like, "Oh, can Mike Woodson recruit now?" And I'm like, I never offered an opinion on whether Mike Woodson could
I think you did, actually.
I swear to God, I did. I went back and listened to everything and watched and read everything just to make sure. Like, I'm sure somebody did. And I might have privately had questions about it, but I didn't express them publicly ever. And it just became a thing. Like, and this was the same deal. Like, apologize to Terrence Shannon for calling him something that I never called him or even implied. Whatever. Let me ask you this, because Illinois, because earlier you said these things should be taken on a case-by-case basis. Well, the policy in place at Illinois that created this entire situation does not allow for these things to be taken on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, they are. Well, the first, you're talking about the first one.
Yes,
if you're charged, you're immediately suspended.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so, like, based on the policy in place at Illinois, and I just think this is interesting to think about. Terrence Shannon should not have played basketball now. The last season. After he was arrested, he should have never played it at Illinois again, based on the policy in place. All right. That obviously would have been an awful thing had it happened, because he was found not guilty, and there appears there was no evidence that suggests he did what he was accused of doing. As far as I know, that policy is still in place at Illinois and other universities. Is that something people should look at? That policy that everybody says celebrates, like, people say this is the way we take these things seriously. Well, the way you do it would have cost this young person his final year of college basketball, a trip to the Elite Eight, an opportunity to go to the final. It would have ripped it all away. Is that a policy universities should have? This is way above my pay grade, but like, you ready for this? I never said Terrence Shannon shouldn't be playing at Illinois. Illinois is the one that said Terrence Shannon shouldn't be playing at Illinois. It wasn't me or you.
These are the kind of questions and big picture questions, serious situations that universities have myriad meetings on long before they ever become official policy, obviously. And to have it, to say it should be the other way and be case by case, you open yourself up to even more criticism. Whereas, okay, player A had this happen and you decided to sit player A, but player B had this happen, you decided to sit player B. You invite more weighing one case versus the other. Whereas in this, if you actually get to the point where you are charged, and there was a certain threshold that had to happen with Terrence Shannon Jr., and it did, despite the not guilty verdict coming months later. I am breaking news. I am not a legal expert or a Title IX expert, so I'm not going to say it should necessarily be that way across the board. However, it does. I would anticipate that more universities than not will continue to have this policy in place because it protects them in this instance there. And I am interested to see whether it's college basketball, college football, anywhere else, and this is really pertaining to colleges, considering the parameters here. When we see something like this again, and if a judge would agree in this kind of case, because you can make, I understand why you're setting me up for this Q, GP, and you can make the argument that
I'm not even trying to set you up. I don't even know that there's a great answer for this. I don't know that there's a good way to handle these types of things.
I would say there isn't, and it just, my bottom line baseline on this is allegations of rape and sexual assault are among the most complicated cases, the most serious cases, and among the cases that get so polarizing in the public realm, because you're often dealing with an athlete that is beloved by a fan base that is willing to look past some issues. And I'm not speaking to TSJ here. I'm speaking generally, broadly speaking here. And so for every X amount of times when that does happen to be the case, and there was a conviction in a guilty verdict versus the much less frequent occurrences when there is a not guilty verdict found, it only makes these situations more flammable, people more skeptical on both sides. I can't say that it is a wrong policy to have in place, but it does set up situations like this where a university can basically default to the situation and the position that Illinois did. And I'm not even necessarily saying that's the wrong one, GP. We might slightly disagree there. You get to the point where you take it to a judge, say, here's my case, here's why you're restricting my right to presumption of innocence and my earnings potential, because if I don't play, like, this has long-term effects on my entire career. I'm telling you I did not do this. I'm telling you I am not guilty. And by restricting me from playing, the judge in that case clearly decided, okay, no, we're going to override the suspension. You're going to be able to play. Not necessarily convinced that's the worst course of action here.
Okay, I guess to that I would just say, then fine, say that. The only thing that not aggravated, that's not even the right word, but that I kind of rolled my eyes at is the whole, it's out of our hands. It wasn't out of their hands. If they would have said, hey, we need to protect ourselves here, and whether we're comfortable with this or not, protecting ourselves now just includes allowing Terrence Shannon to lead us out of the tunnel, play X amount of minutes per game, take all the shots, whatever. All right. So that's where we're at. At that point, I'd go, well, I could say I disagree if I did, but I'd go, hey, I get it. I get that. Or they could say, well, listen, we're reinstating Terrence Shannon, not only because a judge ruled in this way, but because we believe in this young man. And we're not comfortable ripping away. We believe in this young man. We don't think he did this, and we're not going to ruin his final season of college basketball based on what we believe are false allegations. Instead, they try to play it both sides. They try to be like, we take all this very seriously, and this is our policy that we stand on. But, now there's nothing we can do. saying there's nothing we can do, it's out of our hands, and I'm not quoting it, but like that's certainly the message that was sent. I thought that was. I just don't think it's true because it's not. It's not true. There were the idea that it was out of they had a next step if they wanted to take the next step in the spirit of standing behind the policy that they've created, and they didn't want to take that next step, and it for perhaps you ready for this for totally sensible and logical legal reasons, but that is not the way they explained it at all. They acted like there was nothing they could do once the judge ruled that way, and it wasn't true that day. It's still not true today, and that's it's the main issue that I raised.
Yeah, appreciate the listeners finding us, the ones that were doing so in good faith. And as always, I think we pride ourselves on the podcast for being willing to talk about the difficult subjects in the midst of them happening and being in the news, and then afterward, regardless of where we landed on a specific topic there. So we were not going to not address this on the show, and certainly Terrence Shannon Jr. deserved a long, lengthy segment about his not guilty verdict. Now the draft is just over a week away, and we'll see where he winds up getting picked. And I just one last thing to echo here and talking to a few folks. I have heard kind of the same from NBA folks that with this coming down, in terms of like overall character profile, like it will be taken into consideration, but I don't think it's going to inhibit where he will be picked. On the note of the NBA, by the way, we got an NBA champion on Monday night. I feel like someone had Celtics in 5. Nada, I'm going to need a partners first. I got to figure out during this break who on the podcast picked Celtics in 5. We'll figure that out, but Nada, let's get a word from our partners here real quick.
There's some new players in town, and they brought the plague.
You got my attention. You don't want that. Welcome to Kingstown.
Mayor of Kingstown. New season now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
The Celtics did win. I believe it's the 18th championship.
It is.
Last night, defeating the Dallas Mavericks. Coincidentally,
Celtics in 5 over here, by the way.
Yeah. What did I say?
You said 7. It's all good. You were close.
I was close. I just needed I don't know. Can Luka guard somebody? Christ.
Yeah.
Loser.
Coincidentally, I'm in Texas, right? So you had a bunch of people. I'm confident among the reasons I was able to get the seats I got is because season ticket holders were like, we're going to stay home and watch the Mavericks. We'll put these on StubHub or something.
There you go.
Okay. Anyway, like the people sitting next to it, they're like, they're Rangers fans, they're Mavericks fans. And so the Mets jump on the Rangers like 7, whatever. I mean, it was a blowout last night. It was the best baseball game in the history of the sport. And it happened last night in Arlington, Texas. Best baseball game in the history of the sport. And you had people like literally in the second inning leaving saying, all right, have fun, Mets fans. We're going to watch Mavericks. And then that game goes the way it was. And they were like, we'd go to the concession stand and be like, this is the worst night in Dallas sports history. And I'm like, well, this can't be the worst night in Dallas sports history. Something involving the Cowboys probably was. But the Celtics win the championship.
Yes. Hold on. This doesn't even come close to like top 20 Cowboys results.
It didn't feel like it, but they were very depressed in Globe Life last night. They weren't enjoying.
I can't even tell you what Globe Life is, by the way. No, what classic like branding American Stadium Globe Life? What the hell is Globe Life?
I have no idea,
okay.
But I will tell you, the stadium amazing.
Yeah, I've been in the vicinity because I've been to the Cowboys stadium,
right?
But yeah,
it's like 72 degrees. It's like you walking in. It's like you're walking.
Oh, it's not open air.
It was not last night. I don't know if it is at
all. Got a roof that closes.
Man, I tell you what. After last night, I think all baseball stadiums. No.
I can't live with this.
It was so nuts.
I can't come to terms with the idea that the Bears are going to build a new football field and they're going to put a roof on it.
Oh, it's so nice. It was so pleasant the entire time. I know it lacks character and all that stuff, but man, after spending all day at a water park,
you got some color too. Yeah.
Yeah, I was out there.
Did you go down one of those big drop slides?
Did them all.
I
got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. I got to do them all. I
love that, man. That's good stuff.
So it was a fun night. And Globe Life, I don't know about what they do, but they make a nice stadium. I enjoyed their ballpark. And so anyway, Celtics win. You hit us on text last night with an interesting question.
Yes.
How many people associated with these Boston Celtics will end up in the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame? I put a list together. Let's see if it I'm assuming you did too. Let's see if it matches your list.
I did. Okay.
All right.
What do you got?
Let's start with Jason Tatum.
Tatum's going to the Hall of Fame.
That's right. And so is Jaylen Brown.
Jaylen Brown, as a function of winning this championship, and by the way, being the MVP. On that note, do we agree with Jaylen Brown as MVP of the finals?
I did not watch a second of last night's game, but I do.
Tatum had a good game.
I think he was arguably, if not definitely, the most important player. It was weird.
He was very good. I think it was close, but like
you had a Porzingis game, and then you had a Holiday game.
You did,
and so it wasn't like one person, and maybe that's the lasting legacy of this Celtics thing, if they have a legacy, is that like it wasn't just one person that did it. Well, that's the story of the Celtics. It's not just one person who does it. You had a Porzingis game, you had a Holiday game, you had but I think Jaylen Brown was. I don't know what happened last night, other than I looked at the box score, but before last night I would have voted him the Finals MVP. Yes.
I feel I'll say, and I'm not saying that Iguodala wasn't, worthy of consideration, but like Brown's MVP this year is more than I think Iggy the year that he won with the Warriors.
I agree with that.
And with all that, anyway, when Silver said Jaylen Brown, I was a little shocked because I was expecting Tatum, and then I think Jaylen was genuinely shocked, and you heard the pop in the crowd, and maybe there's some sort of poetic justice is not the phrase here, but like the idea that it was Tatum and Brown, they're kind of 1-2, and it's, Tatum had the moment where he almost went full on Kevin Garnett. I don't know if he was doing an intentional homage there. I don't know what was happening. I thought he was going to say anything is possible. I literally thought he was going to scream it. I was waiting for it. A funny moment there. Anyway, continue. Yeah. I think that because, in particular, getting the Finals MVP, I think Jaylen Brown is heading to the Hall of Fame.
I do too, because like his career's not over. He's a young guy. He might do this again. It'll be interesting to see how this unfolds going forward, because I know they say all the right stuff and they're holding trophies right now, but whether it's the history of great sports teams and duos or Hall and Oates, when
Tatum and Brown, Hall and Oates, yes.
It's much easier to navigate this thing when one guy is easily Nikola Jokic and the next guy is easily Jamal Murray. And nobody's debating who's more important, who's better, Jokic or Murray. It's like but when it becomes who is it, Penny or Shaq? Who is it, Kobe or Shaq? Who is it? I think Michael and Scotty became a thing for a minute, even though that's weird and probably a bad example. But like Jaylen Brown now winning Finals MVP a week after Jason Kidd said, "Oh, well, Jaylen, he's the Celtics' best player," given that most people have for a while now regarded Tatum as their best player. That's just going to be an interesting thing to see how other top-tier duos that have won championships have not handled this type of thing well going forward. And they have to sit down 15, 20 years later and do a 30 for 30,
Yep. Agreed.
So we'll see where it goes. But anyway, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, I think they're both going to the Hall of Fame. Drew Holiday's going to the Hall of Fame.
Is he?
Two-time champion. Two different teams.
Is Drew Holiday going to the Hall of Fame?
I think he might.
I don't think he's there yet.
Maybe not there yet, but he might.
You think he's going? This is a projection, so you think he'll be there?
An elite perimeter defender who was a very important piece of multiple championship teams, different franchises. I could make the case. Maybe not there yet, but can get there.
I can get there. Hold on. Let me bring up his stats here real quick. Drew Holiday career, 16 points a game, 4.2 rebounds, 6.4 assists, 46% shooter. How many times has he been an all-star here? He's been a 2-time all-star, 6-time all-defensive team. He's approaching the conversation.
I agree with that. Not there yet.
I considered him, but I have him on the outside looking in. He is an interesting one. I almost feel like and I don't know his contract situation, frankly. If he runs it back with Boston next year and they win it again, and he's as impactful next season as he was this season, then I think it's a real heavy case. I would put him on the outside looking in right now. I would not put on the outside look. Al Horford's going to Hall of Fame.
Al Horford, he's on my list. He's
going. And this is kind of why I wanted to do this.
Two-time
He's going to the Hall of Fame. It is the
at
Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. Our guy over here won back-to-back NCAA titles and was a major factor, a key factor on those Florida teams. It's the Florida winning combined with finally getting the NBA title. And, oh, by the way, being, an important piece on the Celtics team. We had the recent passing of Bill Walton and the fact that the Celtics win in this year of all years, finally for the first time in 16 years. I say finally kind of tongue-in-cheek there. Walton was a key six-man. Horford was a bigger piece on this team than Walton was on the 86 team, obviously. Now that 86 team was way better than the Celtics team, even though the Celtics team was tremendous statistically there, which is a whole other conversation. But how about this on Horford? Back-to-back champion in the NCAA, gets an NBA title. He's been an All-Star 5 times as recently as 2018. He's been an NBA All-Defensive Player before. He was a second-team All-American, and I think the thing that gets me into the Hall of Fame for him is he has been a relevant contributing player in the NBA for 15 plus years. He has never been at any point in his career a top 15 player top 10 player in the NBA. He's been an all-star. I would never say that he was ever a top 10 player in any of those years he was an all-star, but the fact that he has been consistently an all-star as early as 2010, just a few years removed from his Florida time, then as recently as 2018, and that he has been a good to almost great player for the majority of his career. That's what gets him into me more than anything. So that was oh, by the way, the Celtics won. Just so you know, I'll say he should be going to the Hall of Fame. He's not going to be a first ballot guy. Al Horford should be going to the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame, which you look at him, you kind of look at a guy, you look how he plays, look at his stats, you're like, is he really a Hall of Famer? Like Al Horford? I'm just saying, on resume, overall, we agree, right? He's going. He should go.
Al Horford will be in the Hall of Fame for all the reasons you just stated. Incredibly long and successful NBA career that followed, back-to-back national championships in Florida. Al Horford's in the Hall of Fame. On Drew Holiday, I just went and looked this up real quick.
Okay.
Another thing to consider, he already has a gold medal and is about to get another one.
Does that I'm not saying it shouldn't matter.
It does. Matter. It definitely does matter.
It does matter?
Everybody will tell you it matters. Like Pau Gasol goes to the Hall of Fame in part because of his international accomplishments.
All right. I'm looking at guys with 2 or fewer All-Star appearances.
Okay, it's hard to find, but
I don't know if there's a single person that has. I wonder if there's anyone with 3 or fewer that's in the Hall. I'm looking right now. 3 or fewer. I don't think that exists.
Mo Cheeks is an interesting one. Mo Cheeks is a 4-time All-Star, a 1-time NBA champion, 4-time All-Defensive First Team. So Holiday's we got 1 more championship than him, 2 fewer All-Star game appearances. It's similar all-defensive stuff. I agree with this. If somebody said this about Drew Holiday, I would agree with it. Not there yet. I could see it.
He can get there. It's if the career ended now, I would say no. But that's a fascinating one. And then there's no one else on the roster now.
I didn't think so on the roster right now. So let's go to the other stuff. Brad Stevens.
He's going to the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
He took. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be the Celtics GM for the next 20 years. I don't know. Who knows what his future will include if he's going to do this. He did make the move from wanting to pivot off of coaching the Celtics to running the Celtics and won a championship. It took him 11 years, by the way. He left college basketball. He left Butler to win an NBA championship. He finally did it, but not in the way that he would have thought when he left to take that gig. But the fact that he got Butler to back-to-back championships when Butler was a Horizon League program, and then doing this with the Celtics, he's going to go to the Hall of Fame. Who knows when it will happen? It will happen. It is a guarantee. And the Celtics thing is what's going to get him there. But the Butler stuff is going to be, in my opinion, a very significant portion of it, because to look back on, they were one almost shot away from winning the whole thing. So we agree. At this point, come on now. He is overseeing a team that was dominant in the context of this season. The Celtics just put up really one of the better statistical seasons in recent NBA history, and Stevens is going. Yes. So it'd be like if they the Butler stuff alone should maybe get him into the Hall of Fame. Maybe. I mean, it'd be like it is insane back to back with Butler, but it was a short coaching career in college, so I'm not sure. The Celtic stuff again, because basketball does different than football. He's going to the
back-to-back championship games is outrageous. Back-to-back championship games out of the Horizon League is like imagine it, like Doug Gottlieb takes Green Bay to back-to-back national championship games.
Oh, you ready for that reality? Oh my God.
Ooh, buddy, that'd be something, wouldn't it?
Oh my gosh, the idea that Gottlieb coaching a title game. Okay. That's
back-to-back years.
Back-to-back. And at trivia time, what seeds were Butler when they went to the title game?
They were
Can you call it?
They were a 7 or an 8 one time, something like that.
They were an 8 the second year.
Yeah.
What
And
were
the
they
one
the
before,
year they lost to Duke?
like a 5.
They were a 5. There you
Thought
go,
it was
buddy.
something like that. Yeah.
There you go.
Look at me.
There
Look
you
at me.
go. Love to
Look at-
see it. So you've got.
Brad Stevens. Okay, so you ready? I got another one. I got another one. You don't have anybody. Jeff Van Gundy.
Oh, okay. So
Senior-
he was a consultant.
senior
Yeah, he's
consultant.
gonna get a ring. There you go.
Just like as a contributor, like I mean, you coaching,
That's a good question. Will he
broadcasting.
get there as a contributor eventually? Van Gundy reportedly going to be the lead assistant of the Clippers, by the way, next.
Right. Yeah, I read a story. Like, man,
That's interesting. I don't
had
know.
a rough year, Jeff Van Gundy. No, I'm not even joking. I mean, like,
Oh, did he?
Yeah, like lost a friend and lost.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And then,
Okay.
Lost his job, and like, there's been some real hard, like, not. It's been a rough year. I just leave it at that. People can Google the story.
I hear you. Van Gundy. So hold on. Do your tally then. How many?
So I got Tatum. Let's break this down. I got Tatum, Brown, Horford, Stevens, definitely. All right. Holiday.
Those are my 4. Yes.
I think Van Gundy likely, Holiday maybe, and then
Peyton
obviously,
Pritchard.
Peyton Pritchard and Xavier Tillman Sr.
Shouts to Xavier Tillman, by the way.
That's my former coworker, Xavier Tillman, now a world champion. Don't rule this out. I obviously not today. Joe Mazzulla could.
Yeah, no, that's. I was thinking about it all last time. Like, he's 35. He's just
he's 35.
Guided his team to an NBA championship. Like, who's to say Joe Mazzulla won't have 4 NBA championships to his name when we look up in 15 years? We don't know that. So it's on the table. There is the potential that this Celtics team, when we look ahead 25 years into the future, could have 7 people associated with that are in the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame, which is interesting to me. But your locks are Tatum, Brown. I think.
Horford is a lock. Don't worry about it.
He should. I think he should be a lock. But the fact that I'm hesitating, maybe I don't know. But he should be going. And then Stevens. Those are in. Your Holiday and Van Gundy ones are also pretty intriguing there. So this Celtics the playoffs this year were just kind of whatever. Like, I thought. Maybe you disagree. Like, I always watch the playoffs. I enjoy it.
Everybody was hurt.
I don't know. This was a forgettable finals. The playoffs were kind of just whatever. And for whatever reason, maybe it's because it's a series and it's not a single game elimination. But whereas UConn had this, like, good God, man, like, what is this? What are we watching? This is stupid. Why do they keep doing this? They just killed everyone last year. Now they're doing it again. No one can keep a game. They refuse to play a close game. They're going on 30-0 runs. Like, there was a spectacle about UConn's dominance that, for whatever reason, to me at least, and people might disagree, I just did not get that with the Celtics. So, like, I was riveted by the Nuggets run a year ago. Obviously, some of those Warriors championships brought some of the best appeal to the NBA that we've seen over the past 15 or so years. The Celtics one just feels like they were dominant but boring. And I don't want to say nondescript because, Tatum's such a great player going to the Hall of Fame. I remember talking to Tatum at the Garden his freshman year at Duke. I actually think they played Horford's alma mater. I think they played Florida. And for whatever, I don't know. I just talked with him for like 7-8 minutes after the game. And I walked away. I remember walking away from that. At that point, like, he's a highly rated freshman, all that, being like, this guy is going to the NBA. He's going to have a long career, and he might even need to be the number 1 pick in next year's draft. And I think he went 3rd overall. And to see him kind of, be on this journey, he's someone who is deserving of having a championship ring. But for whatever reason, the Celtics run, I don't know. I wasn't enthused by the playoffs this year, and I don't mean that to be like an NBA downer, because I'm not. I love the playoffs, but this one, I don't know. There was just. I didn't find myself riveted the way I thought I might have. That's all.
Okay. And then we'll get out of here. On Tatum, he was 3rd in that draft. He went behind Markelle Fultz and Lonzo Ball. If you remember, that's
how
when
about
Boston,
that? That was it. The Fultz and Ball. Man, oh man.
Yeah, that's when Boston brilliantly traded down, and Danny Ainge said something along the lines of, "We're going to get the guy at 3 that we would have taken at 1. It's fine," because they knew Philadelphia was taking Fultz. They knew the Lakers were not passing on Lonzo, and that was one of those where the number 1 pick was debated throughout the year. It wasn't like it's going to be Wembanyama and everybody agreed. It was debated. There was somebody there was one NBA scout that I would talk to in that time consistently, and like send them mock drafts and what's the dumbest thing you see, what's the smartest thing you see, what am I missing? And I'll never forget. I give this person credit every time he said, just make sure you have Jason Tatum going first. He will be the best player. Just put him at the top. And then you get to a point where you're trying to project what Philadelphia will do as opposed to what you would do. But this person was the only person I remember talking to in that time who never wavered off. Jason Tatum will be the best player from this draft class. And I don't care how you show me all the Lonzo Ball highlights. I'm telling you who the best guy is going to be, Tatum. And you look back on it now, and that appears to be right. He's been fabulous. On the Celtics, I think what happened to them, their path to the finals was against one banged-up team or another, or a team that only got where it was because it played a banged-up team.
You going Mickey Mouse Championship right now?
No, I'm just saying that if you want to know why people were bored by this run and or they were not, based on what the Celtics just did, win the East by like 14 games and then blow through the entire postseason, we should be calling them, we should be waking up today going, is this an all-time great team? Is this one of the best teams?
That doesn't seem to be.
No, and you want
like that was there with UConn. Now, maybe listen, we're not an NBA podcast, so maybe that's out there.
Yes,
but,
we are.
Okay.
Yes, we are. We are an NBA podcast.
They just run a lot of close games, which doesn't help either. Like there were so many NBA games where I was checking out by like the end of the third quarter because I'm like, this is a joke. I think that was also part of it, not just the Celtics, but just generally speaking, there wasn't a lot of compelling finishes.
Yeah, and so what we should be based on nothing. If I just showed you the efficiency numbers and the record and the postseason record, you go, my God, is that the greatest team in the history of the sport? Those are the conversations we should be having, or something along those lines. Not that's hyperbolic, but you get the point. Instead, it's like, yeah, good for them. And the reason it's just that is because I think they have a lot of very good players, even great, but they don't have anybody who's in the conversation for greatest player in the world.
Typically, or if they don't have is Jason Tatum oh my God, we are floating into like, is Jason Tatum a superstar? I can't stand these kind of conversations, but I think that actually has a connection to what we're talking about.
Typically the world champion has a player that can at least reasonably be described as in the conversation for best player in the world. It's Jokic, it's Steph at one point, it's KD at one point. There's nobody on the Celtics that's in that conversation right now. All right. So that's part of it. The other part of it is, again, they just beat one banged up team after another to get to the finals, or either beat a team that just wasn't very good and only got to that place in the playoffs because the other team that they had to eliminate lost its best player too. Is a lot of that stuff. And then, even Embiid and, on ABC the other night was like, hey, everybody got hurt, including us. And then they get to the finals, and I know we got caught up in Luka, Kyrie. You know what that was, really? It was a 5th seed.
It was a 5 seed. Yep.
It was a 5th seed from the Western Conference. It was the 5th best team in the Western Conference throughout the season. So that's why they're not being celebrated the way, a different champion under different circumstances might. But just take all that, set it aside. Not many franchises run through a regular season and run through a playoffs the way this franchise just did. That's impressive, even if you can nitpick it if you want to.
Let's get out of here. What's on the docket today, by the way? More water slides? What are we doing here?
Okay, ridiculously, and I should talk to these people. Six Flags runs a water park and a theme park. They're right here right by the baseball stadium and the football in the Cowboys AT&T
Interesting
stadium.
That you're at a Six Flags, by the way.
And the kids just like roller coasters. Do you know the ballpark at Arlington's just still sitting right there?
Yeah.
It's just there.
It's there.
I don't know what they're doing with it, but it's just there. So the water park and the theme park are both closed on Tuesdays. That seems like bad planning.
That's terrible times right now.
I know.
Tuesdays?
Why wouldn't you close the water
you gotta do a
park?
little scrub down, get the suds out.
I know, but why wouldn't you record? They're different things. Why wouldn't you close
so there's
one?
2 different facilities both closed on the same day. Yeah, that's bad stuff.
I would do so. Water park's closed on Monday. Theme park closed on Tuesday. That way, like if you're a visiting family, we'll do the one this day. So like it's Tuesday. Everything's closed. So I don't know what.
I feel like if it was Six Flags presented by Globe Life, there wouldn't be this problem.
I agree with you. So beyond that, I don't even know that we want to go to the theme park now because it is very hot outside. We were at a water park yesterday and it was uncomfortable for the kids. It is very hot outside down here in Texas.
You don't say.
It's so hot in Texas. So I don't know. I'm going to close this computer. And then I don't know what we're going to do. And we didn't plan on going back to the ballpark tonight, but we might just because the kids, it was a perfect experience for them. They like Lou Severino tossed my little guy a baseball, and nice. Francisco Lindor hit him with a what's up and a thumbs up. And these are things they'll remember. I didn't get to do this stuff when I was a kid. And I remember the only baseball player I can ever remember standing in front of is Tito Landrum. He played for the Cardinals, and the Cardinals played an exhibition game at Tim McCarver Stadium in Memphis before the start of the 86 season. So I was around my kid's age, and I remember Tito Landrum forever. You don't know Tito Landrum. Nobody knows Tito Landrum. I will never forget Tito Landrum because I stood in front of him.
No context now. Tito Landrum. How do you spell that?
Tito Landrum.
I got the Tito part. How do you spell Landrum? Landram?
Drum. I think.
UM?
Drum. Tito Landrum. And so, like, my kids are getting these moments with Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor, and I don't know. It was such a perfect night last night. I thought it might be overdoing it, taking them back to back. But I think when I close this computer and I walk back to the room and I say, hey, what do you guys want to do tonight? They'll say, go back to the game. They had a blast.
All right. Good deal. I'm going to pull a you. I'm working on a mock draft all day.
Oh,
that's my Tuesday.
I did that Sunday. That was my Father's Day.
Yeah, I'm going to okay, well, there you go. Well, I'm going to get that mock draft stuff. And on that note, we can get out of here. We will either later this week or early next week. Haven't nailed down the details just yet. We are going to do a mock draft episode. Not just me and GP. We'll get some special guests in here, and we do one every single year. So we got that coming in the feed in short order.
Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry Teagle, legend, Huck Larnell. Thank you guys once again for listening, watching the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple and Spotify. More of us than there are of them. That needs to be reflected in the comments. So do that. We will talk to you again later on this week. Till then, take care.